Hello and welcome to a new episode of Real PR with me, Fiona Scott. How are you? How's your day going, your week or your month? Today I'm joined by a colleague I haven't seen for we've worked out about 15 years. Please introduce yourself, Nat Low.
Well, you've done the first bit with the name, which is good. Yes, my name's Nat. We worked together I can't even remember which year it was, but it feels relatively recently, but it was more than 10 years ago at ITV making documentaries. And then kind of lost touch, although you're very active on social media.
Sorry about that.
It's hard to lose touch with you, which is a really good thing. I've stayed doing factual video, factual television, the same world that we were in, but moved slightly towards the world of PR, and launched a new business just recently. And because of that, then we reconnected. And you said, come on the podcast. And I was like, yes, I do want to come on the podcast. And here I am.
It is weird though, isn't it, Nat? Because I remember when I first started my business, because in the first few years I did TV contracts and the business bubbled away in the background.
Yeah.
And eventually realised I was going to have to commit full-time at some point. It was really weird for someone like you and I to understand that I needed to step up and be seen, because we've spent our career making other people look good, telling other people's stories, but who's going to buy from you if they don't know who you are? How are you dealing with that?
Well, that's a really good question. It's something I think about quite a lot. We have, in our business, we have a small number of high-value clients, if you know what I mean. But right now, the launch of the new business, it's not a change of area; it's an expansion. My brother's joining the business, and we thought we need to kind of give it a new name, start again. But I've been running the business since 2011, and it's been growing, and we're adding on a new section to it. And our first thought was exactly that: how do we make the expansion that we need? How do we find new clients? We're not radically changing what we're doing. Toby and I have worked together in 4 other people several times previously in 3 other businesses, but not our own. This is the first time we've done it together. And what we're doing is our big target market is FTSE 100 companies. So we already have some clients in the FTSE 100. Big companies, and it's a lot of you know people, they know people, and you look after your clients very, very closely. And it's not a mass market situation. It's a small number of clients, but we need to expand. We want to expand, and our offering is changing slightly. So what we're doing is we needed to create something of value, like you're doing with this podcast. People will listen because it's of value. We needed to create something of value for our potential clients. So there are 100 of them, 100 companies in the FTSE 100, and so what we're doing is we work primarily with companies around around results, which they will do. They release results 4 times a year, but they normally make a big fuss over them at the half year and the full year. And sometimes also they'll have a capital markets day where investors in these companies will come together, and the company will tell its story. They'll say, this is what we're doing. And that often happens around a change of strategy or a change of management. And they want to say to the market, look, up front, this is what we're doing. And they'll spend sometimes a whole day together with a group of people. So that's the market. That's what we serve. Those moments. We'll make films for companies around their results. We'll make films for companies around those capital markets events. So what we're doing right now is we've completed part of it, and we're doing another part now, is we've done a survey of what companies do, because it turns out that if you are in investor relations at one of the FTSE 100, something that's of real value is to know, what does everybody else do? If your management is saying to you in the IR department, we've got a new strategy coming out, we need to run a capital markets day and get analysts and investors together to tell them our story, then something of value to you is to know, well, what does everybody else do? How do these work? What works and what doesn't work? What have people tried in the past, and how does it work? So we've done a survey of the whole group of these large companies, both in what they do around results and what they do around capital markets days. And then we're taking that back. We're interviewing IR directors, investor relations directors, and we're also doing a survey of looking back through time over what people have done and what effect it's had. And then we're taking that survey back to those people and saying, well, okay, this is a value to you. Here's what people do. Here's what you're doing. Here's what everybody else does, and then see if we can help them. So it's the well-worn path of, you have to take something of value. You have to produce something that people want, and then take it to them, and that starts conversations. So, yeah.
I mean, your market's really different to mine because I've actively gone after small business owners because personally for me, I feel I make more impact there, and I suppose the budgets are smaller. It's as simple as that, really. But at the end of the day, it's all storytelling about people, isn't it, Nat?
Yeah, I mean, it's it has become in the last sort of decade a bit of a cliche. Everyone says, "Oh, everything's a storyteller." It's just like, well, you and I know that's not the case. You know, if you're building a motorway, you're not a storyteller. You're building a motorway, but nevertheless, every business has a story to tell, and it is really important that that story is told well. And that doesn't mean expensively. It doesn't, define exactly how it has to be done. But you've got to, there's that bit of knowing how to tell a good story. And knowing how to put it together and helping companies through that, because that is not the business they're in. There might be an insurance or something like that. It's not necessarily the business they're in, and that is what we do for companies of all different sizes. I mean, we do have some clients of much smaller companies, and it's always the same. And it's it's the most exciting part of what we do is going, we nose around, just exactly like we used to do. You go on a shoot somewhere for a broadcast, you're just nosing around in this case, other people's businesses and meeting people and seeing what they do. And it's exciting and interesting. I'm naturally nosy and helping the companies understand which bit of their business is, to tell a really good story and then helping them do it. So yeah, you're exactly right.
Okay, I'm going to take us back in time now. When you were purely in TV land with me, and you've done other things as well in TV land, give us, one or two stories you did that were really memorable that have stayed with you.
Right. Yes. So when ITV in Bristol, there were several, and we worked for James Garrett, amazing character, who was just a great leader in terms of sort of nudging that team towards finding the West Eye View team to finding really interesting stories. And I think we punched above our weight from we were regional, sometimes multi-regional, but it was nevertheless a regional outfit. The budgets were quite small, but he had great ambitions. We did one where we went after a recycling firm that had recycling contracts across this area, and I can't remember how we started with it, where the original evidence was for it, but we had this suspicion that they, waste used to be a business of very thin margins, and then recycling came along, and suddenly you're making quite a lot of money on things like taking food waste and then composting it, and all that. And I'm not going to name names because this was a long time ago.
I remember.
It's wise not to go there. But we did a film where we just had this suspicion that the kind of the chain didn't really work. So you put your chicken carcass out to be collected. Somebody comes along and collected it. And the story was that we were being told that was then composted and it was put on farmland and it was the virtuous green circle and that was great. Now, it turned out that wasn't at all what was happening. What was actually happening to it was being composted at vast expense to the council taxpayer. And then it was just being put in the tip, because nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted half composted chicken waste, because you can't put it on, if you're not allowed to put it on agricultural land unless you've got a special license. So I remember, the specific point I remember most about that was sitting in a ditch filming from a couple of fields away, filming a tip that I won't name, where this stuff was just being tipped onto the thing and then fronting up to them. And James was always good at, right, you've got to take this and front up to them.
Yeah.
Fronting up to them. And then
he was very good at that.
He was great. Flat denial. No, we're not doing it. And then we sent them the footage and they went, oh yeah, well on this occasion, yes, actually we did do that. And so that was a really good one. And then we did one about organic meat. And we had, again, there was this idea that it wasn't quite what it seemed to be. And we,
I think people from the outside think, though, that in TV we don't do any due diligence before we act on a story like the two you've mentioned. But actually, we have to run it past lawyers before we even film anything, just to prove that there is an issue there before we can put anything together, don't we, Nat? It's really legally complex.
So much, and it's it's really interesting on so many fronts. Broadcast worked in a way that I think there was an understanding between the audience, the producers, and the people who were featured in these things. That we did a lot of research, months and months of research. Lawyers were involved. ITV had its own lawyers, and with that organic meat story, I remember there was we'd found. The thing was we found various butchers around the West that were selling meat as organic that wasn't actually. organic and fronted. That was fronting up to them. I mean, in an environment where there's quite a lot of sharp objects, was a little bit was a little bit nerve wracking. But there was so much research went into it, and there was a fairness between us, the people we were featuring, and the audience, and it was all, absolutely fair and square at the end of it, and so much effort went into that. And on so many levels now, in the internet world, I don't think there's that same understanding.
No.
I don't think the audience understand that doesn't go on so much. That there aren't those controls so much because it's not legally required. Whereas in the broadcast world, so many hoops had to be gone through. And you just couldn't put stuff out that wasn't 100% correct.
I think that people often can be negative about people like us back in the day. I mean, we don't do so much of that now, but will willfully sometimes absorb fake news on various social media platforms. Not pulling out one in particular, and they see their own truth.
Yeah.
What they believe in, not the kind of impartial truth that we used to have to prove to lawyers, not once, not twice, 3 or 4 times per programme.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And it's absolutely true. And I think it's the same in advertising as well. The advertise on the television. Every word is checked through. Online advertising is not the same thing, and it doesn't have the same control. So it's. I mean, I know things, and we've both witnessed this in that the world of factual broadcasting has changed so radically since we were doing it.
Yeah.
And the money has shifted online, and it's a great thing. It's a fantastic thing. It's just that it doesn't operate in the same way. And those investigations that we worked on. The level of truth and accuracy inside them was really phenomenal. It was a great education, I think. Well, certainly for me.
I loved it. And to be honest with you, Nat, I mean, people who've read my book or who know me know, if it hadn't been for redundancy, I would still probably be in that world because I did love it. But unfortunately, people don't pay for journalists like us anymore. I mean. They just don't. I get probably at least once a month, someone will come to me with a very interesting story. They want me to look into it, but there's no money for me to be paid to research that for a year or 2 years. Often on West Eye View, I can think of one story we researched for 3 years because we were waiting for a court case to finalise before we could tell the story. People don't pay for that now, Nat.
No, I know. I mean, it's sort of polarised. I mean, if you can get into the kind of streaming world with a story, or like with the post office, you can get ITV to pick it up and make a big drama. There are the really big stuff. It can work, but it's the lower level stories that could then go on and turn into something bigger later that it's much harder to pick up. And the same as with local press and all that kind of thing. It's the money has moved elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I'm glad of that because I think if you are willing to flex, or that awful word, pivot into the new world, and seek opportunities there, I still find it difficult now to say to someone because you get a nose for it, don't you? Where you think, is this person a bit bonkers, or is there something in this? You get a nose for it, and then you think, I can't. I mean, I'll be honest, I tend to pass it on to various contacts I've got for various programmes that are around today, I won't say who, to see if they can take it further. But I have to wash my hands of it in a way. But if we move into the world you and I are in now, I think you've talked a bit about, we haven't actually put the meat on the bones. What's your company called? What did you do when you left TV? Give us some examples of a couple of companies you've worked with that perhaps if you're happy to name them and they're happy for you to do so. Let's really paint a picture for people, because there will be people listening who are connected to bigger companies that'd be more suitable for you than me, Nat.
I mean, we still do, and I still do some broadcast consulting. So I'll work with mainly foreign channels, news channels, and do consulting with them. And I've just finished a job in the Middle East, and before that there was one in Eastern Europe. So I do that as well, and it's great to be back in newsrooms and doing that, and it's really refreshing to do that, to combine the two. And we do occasionally take on broadcast commissions. We did a series for Sky Arts back in 2020, so we'll do this occasionally. But the company is called Capital Stories, and for good reason, because that's kind of what we do, is we tell stories about companies, and at the capital end of it, as in with results, with when they're talking to investors, when they're talking to the capital markets. So people they're borrowing from, or people who have invested in the company. So that's what we do, and we do those. We'll also do stories and films for companies who want to, who've got something to say. So one of our big clients is BAE Systems, and they are as a fantastic company. It's had it is seen now very differently from how it was seen a few years ago, and I think rightly so. And we make stories about the reality of what it's like working inside the company, because one of their challenges is that they need to recruit the very best people, and we help them do that, which is fascinating. And we work for other, there's a big insurance company in the FTSE 100. We do all of their chief executive communications, particularly around their results and those sorts of things. So that's the up and down, and it can be, one week I can be at a TV station in Kurdistan, and the next week I can be in a boardroom in London, and it's nice that I like the kind of juxtaposition of the two things. It's very, it keeps the interest level going, and that is how it's been since I left full-time broadcast. Has been marrying those two things up, and I've been all over the world working for broadcasters. I mean, pretty much everywhere, and back here working for companies of all different sizes, big banks. HSBC I worked for a long time, making their internal communications films. Again, showing the outside world that not all banks are terrible. Which at that time, that was kind of around, we started doing that around 2011, and that was a really interesting case in point, because it may still be true, but at that time people hated banks because of what had happened in 2007-8. And, with a lot of justification, there was a lot of anger against financial institutions. And I think that still lingers. But I guess the underlying truth of it was that most of what goes on inside banks is good people trying to do good things. They're trying to pay the mortgage, they're trying to help their clients and do good stuff. And that is broadly what was going on. And it's important that people see both sides of it. But it's also important that when they're telling the story, they don't do the kind of whitewashing, and they don't say, yeah, everything's fine here. What are you talking about? No problem. Because, there was a problem.
Yeah.
And I remember, in fact, so good to add, I remember having a conversation within HSBC, which, at the time, employed 335,000 people. Huge in most countries around the world. And listed in the UK and in Hong Kong. So the biggest company in the UK stock market. And we were having a conversation where they were saying they did this sort of re-education program where they'd go around internally talking to all the staff about what had gone wrong. And in their case, they had laundered an almost unimaginable amount of money from Mexico. So people the drug cartels in Mexico chose HSBC as their favoured bank to launder money through. And it was if you can imagine it was happening. Truckloads of cash being driven across the border between Mexico and the USA. And as a result, when they had a US banking license, the US regulator discovered all this was happening, and they were very close to losing their US banking license, which would have been disaster for the whole company, et cetera, et cetera. So they had to pay an enormous fine measured in billions, and they were then under scrutiny, very heavy scrutiny from the US about this, quite rightly. And so this guy would go around, with lots of people going around the company explaining to the rank and file staff what had gone wrong. And it was a great program because they were just saying, look, don't brush it under the carpet. This is what went wrong. And I remember sitting, and even as contractors, we had to go to these meetings. I remember going in. I worked for an agency at the time. We went into these meetings, and I was like, what, really? And they were like, yeah, this is what was happening. And I was like, you know what? On the one hand, I can kind of believe it was happening, but on the other hand, I don't believe that it's suddenly now not happening. There's a lot of this, so it was just a fascinating, you would have found it fascinating. From a journalistic point of view, it was like, what? This? It was just, here's a detail. The drug cartels had suitcases made specifically so that they would fit under the glass in HSBC branches, full of cash. It was at that level of industrial. They laundered something like in total half the GDP of Mexico. That's how much it was in total. It was off the scale. And there were a lot, so this is all documented. This is not the first time this news. So it was a very bad situation. So, and as a good example of how companies get the power of communications. We did a lot of films where we had, in overview, we had good people telling you how not to do bad things, and that's okay. But people everybody is a very sophisticated television viewer. We all watch a lot of TV, and you get what it is, which is a good person telling you not to do bad things, and you kind of part of your brain just switches off. And we went to our client within HSBC, and we said, look, if we were doing this for TV, you'd have some bad people in there too, because it's more interesting. And also, you kind of know it's true. If the bad people are telling you how they laundered money through your bank, everybody's watching, because that's a great story. And so she was a very good client, still is a client, actually works somewhere else now. But she said, yeah, I like that. And she took it straight to the chief exec of the bank. And sat down with him and said, why don't we do this? Why don't we get some fraudsters to tell us how they laundered money through, not necessarily this bank, but banks in general, and how it works from their side? Because that way the staff are definitely going to listen. And to his credit, he went, yeah, all right. Which was quite a thing for a big bank to say, invite some fraudsters.
You could see PR bladness and beigeness coming out in force there.
Yeah. And he went, yeah. And I think if there had been too many intermediaries involved between our client and the big boss, it probably wouldn't have happened, because people would have gone, don't take that upstairs.
That would have been washed away.
Yeah. No. And in those days it was upstairs with the top floor of the bank. Literally took the ideas to the top floor. But she just went ahead and did it. And he was like, yeah. And because he said yes, it was like, oh, okay, right, we've got to do it. And we made 4 or 5 films where we went and sensibly, and this is the same way. Margaret came and worked on it.
Oh, yes,
Our former colleague came and worked on it.
Yeah, that's right.
And she brought somebody else in. Both had worked on panoramas previously, because we were like, we're going to do this properly.
Yeah.
And we did it like it was broadcast. They insisted that anyone we featured had to have already been in prison, served their time. So we didn't want to, glorify criminals.
Yeah.
We did all of that. We went around the world, and some of the people we met, drug dealers in America, people trafficker in Montenegro. Margaret went out there. I went out to Montenegro. We filmed with a people trafficker. They explained how they laundered money through the banks. And it was eye-opening. And it was incredibly successful inside the company and outside this series. I think you can still find it on the internet. Because people watched it, and externally, you got the impression that this is a company that takes this seriously, because they're actually going out and they're saying, come on, let's how bad can it be? Let's get the truth on the table. And they really did. And engaged with all of the worst possible kinds of people. And internally, it was the most watched series they've done, because you would watch it, wouldn't you? If you can see a drug dealer explaining how you launder money, it's fascinating. And it's really useful if you work in a bank to know that. Whereas a good person who's an accountant telling you what not to do, and well, this is what the bad guys do, you want to hear it from the bad guy. So we did that, and I think that period working at HSBC, or working at an agency for HSBC, we got very close to broadcast what we were doing, and we would bring in people like Margaret and other people who worked on panoramas and other things to make stuff that was quite close to the edge. It was a lot of fun doing it, and they were very, very effective.
I think that I should clarify to some of our listeners, which they won't understand, that when we worked on West Ivy, which was a regional current affairs series, many of those subjects went on to become Panorama, because we were watched really closely by the Panorama team, and we made some panoramas ourselves individually. As a result of them. So I often say to people in PR, never ever berate or put down or look down on local media, because the best stories often start at a local level, don't they, Nat?
Yeah, absolutely. And in that case, the episode of that fraud series we did about people trafficking that ended up in Montenegro with this trafficker, we also featured somebody who'd been trafficked to the UK, because we wanted to show what's underneath all of this and what happens to people. And Margaret then left. That when she'd finished, we'd done the series. She took that story, and it was turned into a panorama.
Brilliant.
So it came out of corporate and ended up in a panorama.
Brilliant.
Which was really unusual, but it was a great series, and we met some truly extraordinary people.
Okay, then. So when you're doing that, how do you make company results interesting?
Yes. Now that's okay. So it's better. Now it's better if I talk because I'm aware that it's a bit kind of switch off territory. You think, corporate results. Some of it is not designed to be interesting. Some of it's just information.
Information, yeah.
But there are 2 really good examples. They're not actually clients of ours, but there are 2 really good examples of companies recently who have told a story through their results and through capital markets days and talking to investors, and it's made a gigantic difference to them. Both huge British brands, Rolls-Royce is one of them, Marks and Spencer's is another. They're companies who have completely changed their story. And, there are many reasons, that the hardworking staff, new management, new strategy, et cetera, but at least part of the story is that they have communicated with investors, they've communicated with the markets, and they've shown them as well as told them. They haven't just run through the numbers, they've said, this is our vision. And you see, if you watch the annual results from Marks and Spencer's, you see the chief executive in one of the shops, doing a live from one of the shops. And why not? Because that's what it does. That's what the company does. It's not, fundamentally, it's not about numbers. Marks and Spencer's fundamentally is about the retail experience, and the numbers follow that. And they kind of understood that in their storytelling. And like I say, I'm not bragging because these are not clients of ours, but we, so in our interest, we look across the market at who's doing well and who's doing what in terms of the way they communicate. You look at the share prices of those two companies. I wish I was an investor a few years ago because they have gone up in multiples from where they were. Part of that's the hard work of the staff, part of that's the management, part of that's the strategy, but definitely part of that is going out and telling the story in the right way, showing people what you do. And if you're Rolls-Royce, you need to do that because people don't necessarily understand what Rolls-Royce does. You need to show them what you're doing.
I do think there's some bigger companies struggle with this. I did do some work. I'm not going to say what the company was. They've got 8,000 employees, so smaller than the ones you're talking about, but still substantial. Yeah. They'd never done any PR at all.
Right.
They felt they didn't need to. They made things that go in everyday objects, but their route to market was 4 or 5 big suppliers, I guess, that they were selling. So their customer base was small. They felt they'd done everything. And then they found a couple of things, mainly around they couldn't recruit enough people to fulfill demand. Yeah. So they suddenly thought, well, what do we do? And when I went to them, their internal comms were poor. They didn't think they had to do PR within a business. Now, this is 8,000 people, for goodness sake. You can't just assume they know what's going on or what the motivation is. And the other thing is they did nothing in the local press, even though they had local premises. Therefore, they naturally would recruit within a sort of 50, maybe 60-mile radius. And they suddenly realised that they didn't have the expertise in-house. Their PR team wasn't set up for any of this. I was really shocked at that. And not only was I shocked at that, when I remember one day, you'll get this, one day we were given a presentation by an internal communications person who put up and spoke in corporate speak about her week. It was a very plush, graph thing, everything I'm not. But when I sat down there in the background looking at it, I worked out in her work, goodness knows what she was paid as a marketing manager, that her weekly amount of work was to write 4 blogs and record 1 podcast. But it was presented very beautifully. So it looked impressive. And to me, putting it bluntly, because you'll know in recent years I've become even more outspoken, it was just a pile of BS around storytelling. Yeah. It was just, hang on, folks. Yeah. You may think you're a big noise, but you're treating people really badly. Yeah. You're communicating badly. And the other thing I would say for what you're saying that strikes me is that one brand that was really good at this, storytelling, engaging people and making a moment, was Apple. Yeah. Yeah. And the whole Steve Jobs fanfare, and they've carried it on around what is an iteration of an old product of theirs. It's just, it's masterful.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And it's funny you say that. I was thinking about that just yesterday. You look at the younger generation. So I have a Google phone, which I love, and it's great. And all of my children and my wife, they all have iPhones. Now, I'm saying, and my children say, so weird, you've got an Android phone. And I'm like, well, it's weird, I think it's great.
I always say that to Hannah, my BA, actually. Yeah, we have exactly the same conversation.
And they're like, and I was like, how has, because, since whenever it was, 2007, when Steve Jobs held up the original iPhone, they're the same thing. I mean, it's a black front and it's got a camera on the back. It's got a camera on both sides. They're better now, obviously, but it's the same form that it was, but it's not like in the old Nokia days when they kept changing shape and this, that, and the other. They're basically the same thing. They're just getting faster and the cameras are getting better and whatever. How have Apple managed to make that difference between a Samsung phone or a Google phone or whatever and an Apple phone that the younger generation will call one of them weird? And I'm like, what do you mean weird? It's the same thing, but made by somebody else.
It's fine.
I know it's weird. And that, I mean, the genius of that marketing is just extraordinary. I mean, I think they're having a bit of trouble now in terms of actual numbers of phones sold, because increasingly people are thinking they're not different enough from the previous generation. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. They're really very similar. It's hard to tell the difference.
And also, how can you sustain that forever and ever? That huge market share.
Yeah.
And people are more sophisticated, but hey, they've had a role.
Oh yeah, no, they have. And actually, there's something else that leads on from, we were talking about when we were working together 15 or so years ago. So much has, talk about disruption. I know that, the TV industry has changed just because streamers have come along and advertising's gone elsewhere and all of that kind of thing. But the technology, now, we're sitting here today, you can do this easily. Our workflow as a small business working with video is completely transformed from what it was, with Vimeo and file sharing and the editing is so much easier, so much cheaper. The edit suites that we used to work in.
Oh my gosh!
They were like £100,000 kit out with these expensive tape machines and engineers with head torches on.
Yeah, and it's like £600 a day plus an editor.
Yeah.
Plus that.
Yeah.
Now we can do it us. Well, I don't do it myself from time. But you can do it yourself, because you can buy exactly the same editing software, and I'm glad about that. It makes things more accessible to people.
Much more. And I think the other thing that's happened and is happening now is AI, which is a combination of underhyped and overhyped at the same time, in the sense that there's so much overhype about it's going to take your job, it's going to do this. I expect in the margin somewhere it will do, but we're just now experiencing. We've just made our first principally AI film for a client. And it is magical. So we were doing an animation, and I said, let's do a collage. We'll do a sort of photographic collage and an animation where you have photographic images stuck together and a kind of animated background and words coming across. And it's quite dynamic and it moves, and there'll be music and all that kind of stuff. And it's a sort of thing that's been done before. But the problem with it is, from a production company's point of view, from a client's point of view, is you need to use a lot of photographs. And you've got to get them all cleared, and you probably have to get them from an image library, and they're very expensive, or they're a combination of very expensive and not very good. And you can't. And the other thing is, you can't quite get what you want. You can imagine what you want, but the gap between you imagining it and then finding it somewhere and licensing it and paying for it, it's a slightly unsatisfactory picture that looks a bit fake that you have to pay a lot for. So that was going to be the problem. And then one of the guys who works for me is an absolute genius with AI, and the way I see the AI landscape at the moment is there are a number of engines out there that will create you still images. There's obviously the narrative AI things like the Google's got one, and there's the OpenAI one, where you chat GPT. But on the image side of it, you can type in picture of somebody sitting at a table and it'll produce one. And there are a number of different, Microsoft's got one, and there are various other engines, but you need somebody quite skilled to drive them so that you get what you want rather than a kind of slightly not quite good enough image. And then you can take those images and you can put them into another AI engine, which will then turn them into video. So we had a section of this film where we had generated a kind of side profile image of a runner, somebody running. And then George took that and put it into another engine, and it turns into video of the woman running, and it's indistinguishable from video. Like you think, hang on, that is film. That's not. And every pixel of it was invented by AI. So the beauty of it is, don't have to pay for images that are substandard, and kind of and actually, what's more fake? An image from an image library, which is
stock,
an out of work actor pretending to be in an office, that's properly fake, or an AI image which has just been invented by a computer. You think, well, they're both fake, but the beauty with the AI thing is that you can have exactly what you want. And so then I had George working with our animator, and he was putting all the background together and doing all that kind of stuff. And he's putting the words in and sort of building each scene. And he'd message George, and he'd say, yeah, you know that picture you've sent of that person, can you just make them look to the right a little bit? And he'd go, and come back and then send it back to him. And it would be exactly the same. I mean, you can just adjust everything, and it's so quick. Client loved it. And we were like, this is very creatively very satisfying. And you can now, it's the same process that we've seen with, you know, Vimeo being invented, with non-linear editing, with everything becoming kind of more accessible, cheaper and better. And I think it's absolutely, it's genius. I think we're going to use it a lot.
I think we have a lot of fear around AI. Like, do you remember back in the Millennium Bug Fear?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But the truth is, I always think AI is a tool.
Yeah.
It's a tool. There might be people that use it for bad things. There might be people that the majority will use it for good things. And I think that we've got to be open and embrace it.
Yeah.
Because it isn't going to replace us. It isn't going to be us. No. So it's just not.
It might put some resting actors who are doing image library shoots out of work, maybe, but they'll still be.
But what they'll have to do is flex too, though, now, won't they? They'll have to make sure they build into their pricing.
Yeah.
If you're going to use it for this, there's a cost, and if they don't, if they don't obey that contract, then you're going to get a bill down the line. I just think this. Let's stick our head in the mud. Let's stick our head in the sand and pretend it's not happening and kick against the change.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
It's a pointless waste of time.
It is crazy. And I mean, the other, you know, inside editing software now, you know, it always, I mean, you remember what it was like. You'd come back from a shoot on tape. You'd have to log all the tapes, and it was very hard to stay awake in those windowless rooms, sitting at a machine which probably cost 20,000 quid, the tape machine, sitting there logging all the blinking tapes, and then you go away and then you type it all up, and then you try and do your paper edit with everything like that. Now you put it all into get straight into the editing software. It gives you an instant transcript of the whole thing, and really accurate as well.
Yes.
And even with subtitling now, you have to go through it, and you have to, particularly in the corporate world, you make sure every single word is accurate. But it's 98% there, I reckon, and that's all AI powered, and it's brilliant. And like you say, it's just at the margins, just making everything easier, cheaper, more accessible. Making it easier for us to do our jobs, making the product slightly cheaper for the clients, making it quicker, and frankly slightly better. And
often I find that in my world of small business, focus on perfect, you'll never get a job done. Get it done, tweak it if you need to, and get it consistent and get it speedy. I mean, those days where you take on a video job and you say, I've got it in my contract now, I'll say to a client 4 to 6 weeks because of everything else I've got going on. And I ensure that the only delays therefore are not coming from me, is if the client delays it. Which can happen in corporate world quite a lot. It will be about them. But anyway, I'm going to take us left field now because you live in Wiltshire.
I do.
So talk to me a little bit about that you want to share about your life in Wiltshire and our lovely county.
Yes.
What you like about it.
Oh, I was talking about that just yesterday. In fact, so we live in the Pewsey Vale between Devizes and Pewsey, and which is just stunning. It's a kind of it's a very special part of the world because it's not under threat. For who's going to build a motorway there? There's the M3 to the south, or A303 to the south, and there's the M4 to the north. We've got enough motorways. There's a railway line already. It's just peaceful and quiet. You've got the Marlborough Downs to the north, and then you've got Salisbury Plain to the south. And it's amazing. You can go, if I'm feeling energetic, I can go running up onto the plain. And then you turn around. Your reward is you turn around at the top. You're feeling completely out of breath. You turn around. You look down. It's an incredible valley. So it's absolutely stunning. A very ancient landscape. With all of the archaeology in the Pewsey Vale. I have 5 children. Eldest is 22. The youngest is about to be 13. And the oldest 2 are off at university, and then the other one has just left school, and the other 2 are still at school, and they love it there too. I think. I mean, they'll young people tend to gravitate towards big cities, and they might spend time in London maybe in the future. I don't know, but I think that there'll always be a pull back towards the west and towards Wiltshire. I think. Well, I don't know. Maybe I hope there will be. Anyway, we've ended up living 1.5 miles from my mother-in-law, which is delightful because she has a brilliant relationship with our children.
I do always remember that it's not a house you live in now, where you might have moved a few times. But I remember coming to one of your homes.
Yes.
And this is the working class chip on the shoulder thing. Because I came and you said something about the garden, and I looked up your gate and I thought, that's not a garden. It's a field with an orchard. And I remember distinctly, it's not just you, when I moved into TV in, when would it have been, 1995. The thing that shocked me, I'd never had this in my life, but when I walked into the newsroom, it was before you were there were only 2 of us and the whole team that hadn't been to private school.
Really?
It was the first time I'd ever clocked that my life experience thus far was very different to everybody else. The chip on the shoulder was mine, not theirs. So they would talk about things like different types of wine and experiences at private school, none of which had ever entered my radar or my life before. And you and I had very different upbringings, but I remember it took me a good 2 or 3 months to think, do I fit in this environment from my sort of working class, low income, state school background? And then 2 or 3 months, I remember one day thinking, none of this actually matters.
Yeah, no,
we
exactly.
are actually all good, lovely people doing the best we can in jobs we love.
Yeah.
Because you did have a really big house with a big garden. And didn't your mum, I think your mum's passed.
Yes, she has,
But
yeah.
your mum wasn't one of her houses on the Kevin
Grand
what's his name?
Designs.
Yes,
Yeah.
Grand Design.
Yes. She lived, so I was brought up in Suffolk, and in the kind of mid-80s, my parents moved up there, and what appears to now be sort of like, somebody's monthly salary, managed to buy this massive great house up in Suffolk that was falling to pieces. Lived there very happily for about 25 years. And then after my dad died, my mum carried on living there for a bit, but my brother and I left home, and it wasn't the right... And she had this sort of niggling thing. She thought, I really would like to build my own house. And which is, we've all seen those Grand Design things. It's just like there should be some... Kevin MacLeod should be in people's houses when they think that, just saying, no, don't do that. Come watch this episode, that famous episode where that bloke slips over in the mud and it's just like, everything's going wrong. But anyway, she had some land just next door to where she lived, sold the house, and then with the money built this incredible ultra-modern house in this wood in the middle of nowhere in Suffolk, and it was absolutely incredible. I mean, it was really an extraordinary place. It took a long time to build, and there wasn't a whole episode made about it, but it featured in one of those kind of Grand Designs live programs. But very sadly, Mum, she moved into it, and then less than a year later, she died very suddenly and unexpectedly. But she had at least seen it. She'd moved into this thing, and it was an incredible project. And successfully executed, and it was really an amazing thing that she did. And so I think, I don't. What do they say? Is it twice as long and twice as much, or is it 3 times as long and twice as much? I don't know. Whatever it was.
I don't know. It's never entered my.
But it was
realm.
several times more than she expected, and several times as long. And it's put me off ever doing that. Not my brother though. He's always still has. He hasn't done it, but he still has a hankering after building his own house. And I'm too timid. I just picture the bad bits in the Grand Designs series.
What, you're a bit risk averse, you mean?
When you're living in a caravan in a muddy field,
yeah,
and they're on the phone to the mortgage broker going, please, can we have a bit more money because the builders have gone on strike. That bit is the bit that I'm afraid of. But,
so tell me a little bit about Toby, because we don't know anything about it.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about Toby.
So he and I, he's 2 years older than me, and he and I worked together. Well, originally, so starting off back in the day, I started working as a runner at Sky News, and I used to go back in university holidays doing running jobs there, and I met people there who then I went on to go and work for after I left university at a channel which still exists called CNBC, Business News Channel in London. It was called something else then, and it was an extraordinary and life-changing experience, one of those kind of like real milestone jobs. Led a little bit like James. It was another guy who ran this place, and a really extraordinary guy, and I still work with him now. And everybody who worked there remembers this channel. And there are still reunions. Toby at the time, we were living together, and Toby at the time was training to become an accountant. But by that time, it had become clear to him that was not what he wanted to do. And it worked for some people; it just wasn't his thing. And he said, "Can I come on? Do you think I can come and work at the TV channel?" Because he could see that I was having a great time.
Yeah.
I'd come home in the evening and I'd go through our CD collection and go, that music would work really well on this story I'm working on. And he'd come home in the evening and he'd go, I've got to go through all these spreadsheets. And he was like,
I can see.
Yeah, I want to do more what you're doing.
That.
Yeah. So anyway, he came in and given his due, he gave up the accountancy, came in, was really good at it. And then he went on to the BBC. After a couple of years there, he went on to the BBC, worked on Working Lunch and various other things. And then... and I went off, I left there and I went to go and work on a Channel 5 series and then did several other things after that for Anglia TV, which was great fun. And after that, Toby was recruited by Adam Faith, the now dead pop singer from the 1960s. Adam Faith was starting this was 1998, I think, and he was starting a TV channel called The Money Channel in London, and with another guy, a stockbroker, and they set this thing up, and Toby was running the editorial side of it, and it kind of charted the dot-com boom. The shares went from 20p to £5.50, and everybody was like on paper really rich.
Yeah.
But then they came back down again, down to zero. But it was, and we lived that roller coaster. I then came to work there. Yeah. We lived that roller coaster together. I went off and worked at Bloomberg. Toby went off then into the world of corporate TV. And was very successful at it, ran some big agencies, and he is now mid-50s, and he was running the kind of the biggest of those agencies in London and doing really well at it, and he stepped away from that to now do kind of like, it's time to do your own thing, and with me, and I'd been, over the last few years, I've been kind of nudging him, saying, it's all right on this side of the fence, you don't have to work for other people. And now we're doing this together, which is a very exciting time because it's the fourth place. I think I mentioned that before. Fourth place we've worked together, so we know we work well together, and we're bringing slightly different things to it. We've got existing clients, and it's sort of hopefully going to be a kind of an acceleration, and more fun and interesting projects ahead.
Oh, I look forward to. We'll have to invite him on the podcast.
Yeah.
Right? So say that to him, and I look forward to meeting him, and just tell him that even so, he's still younger than me.
I will. In 50s is a time when it doesn't matter which year it is. You're just in your 50s.
You're just in your 50s.
Yeah. Younger people look and they go, I don't know, kind of 50s. That's where we are.
That's right. Yeah. That's true.
Just nondescript. I think not old, like old. That's what they'd say.
I don't know. People. I sometimes catch children referring to someone who's 40 being old, and I go,
no, that's not old.
Be careful.
That's just kind of, 40s and 50s is kind of like nondescript midlife, like adults.
For us ladies, I would say it's the time where we start to really kick ass.
Yes.
Apart from the whole menopausey thing.
I don't remember a time when you didn't, though.
Oh, bless you for saying that.
I don't remember. There was never a moment when you were shy and retiring. I don't remember that.
Glad.
I don't remember that time.
Glad. That's good. Look,
in a good way.
Nat, we could carry on chatting all day, but let our listeners know, how can they find you? How can they connect with you? Where can they go and have a look at what Nat's doing? capital-stories.com is our website. Or I think if you Google it, it probably comes up. And not all. I mean, a lot of what we do, we're in the shadows, so we don't. The clients say, look, we take confidential.
It's not so much confidential. It's just that they're like, they'll do the showing off about what they're doing, and we're just helping, as it were, in the background, which is how it should be. So, not all of our work is on there, but some of it's on there. Some nice films we've made recently, yes, give us. I think our biggest client has 80,000 employees. Our smallest client has, I think, 20 people working for it. So we cover all shapes and sizes. Brilliant. Well, everyone, pop across to that website and have a look at what Nat's up to. It won't be everything on there, but there'll be some on there so you can get a flavour. And the AI film will be on there, I think, shortly. As soon as the clients put it out on their website, we're going to put it on ours, so you can see what AI films look like. I can guarantee when this podcast goes out, then it will be on there. Great, yeah. So everyone pop across and look at that AI film. Yeah. Thank you for watching today's episode. Really hope you've enjoyed it. You can find out more about me at scottmedia.uk or hop onto Facebook and join Fiona Scott's PR tribe. Until next time, thank you for watching and goodbye.